homicide, violence, assault, rape. You just look at the numbers and look at the racial disparity in the numbers. I don't want to hear from a social worker about how it wasn't his fault. He had a choice to make. Who are we if we as a society take such despicable behavior? And of course I get emotional. Now I'm getting emotional about criminal behavior where they're victimizing people. Well, we should get emotional about it because it's despicable. Little baby sitting on his grandmother's knee on the front porch and some THUG riding by shooting a pistol at his rival out the window and he kills him. That's despicable. Black Lives Matter? Exactly. I resent other people thinking that they look at the color of my skin and they think I know what I'm supposed to say or what I'm supposed to do. I deeply resent that.
Yeah.
On the other hand, you know, when I pick up the newspaper and I read about some of the shenanigans that are going on, I mean, I'm talking about in Baltimore, St. Louis, and you know, Philadelphia, and Chicago, New Orleans, and I feel ashamed. Now, why should I feel ashamed about some knucklehead in some ghetto project somewhere that's ripping somebody off in a carjacking and shoot some other train? Yeah, why should I feel anything about that just because that person is black and I'm black? And I feel like it's my people, you know, and I feel like I'd be damned if I apologize for that. On the other hand, how can I expect somebody to see that and not want to move their family away from it?
Yeah.
And is it enough to just call them a racist? And I feel like the people who represent my group, my racial group, who go on TV, and I could name names, but
sure,
I don't need to, you know, are, you know, it's a song and dance. I mean, they're not dealing with the real thing and they're not being honest with it. And yet if I were to say what I really think, then I'd be a traitor. So it's like a maze. It's like wandering in a maze. I mean, I don't know what to do. And I don't want to feel trapped. You know, I want to be true to myself. So I'm dealing with it the best I can.
Yeah. Well, that was like, so I went to school like kind of later, like only a couple of years ago, I think in 2000, I went to school for social work, or no, 2020, excuse me, for social work. And that was like, I mean, it was crazy just being like, there was no, like even suggesting that somebody have something, you could even be like, obviously there was historical traumas endured and like that there's a real thing with that. Then be like, but despite, you still have to have some sort of like, you know, like like responsibility. Like you are at some point still responsible for your life. Just saying like that, they'd be like, no, you can't, how dare you? And it's just kind of like, well, dude, it's not going to help anybody. Like take like a 40-year-old person and be like, yeah, look, none of this is your fault. So I feel like I feel like everything gets simplified where it's like you have, you know, one group of people being like, it's their fault. They need to fucking get their act together. They're talking about like black people from the inner city. And then you have people being like, look, it's not their fault at all. And it's like, there has to be some, it seems pretty easy to like stitch those two things together. But like, yeah, obviously there's been some terrible stuff that's happened that's had an effect, but there's also needs to be some self-accountability. Like, where do you kind of stand on that question? Or do you just like?
I agree with that. I mean, there are a lot of unfairnesses in the world. And there are a lot of people who are in desperate straits and it could do with some help. And I would not want to be a 22-year-old mother with 3 children and making $20,000 a year trying to get by on earned income tax credit and stuff, and food stamps. I mean, I wouldn't want to be that woman, or I wouldn't want to be one of her children.
Yeah.
That's inequality in spades. But that's a separate point from the point that each and every one of us is responsible for how we live our lives and what we do with our time and the extent to which we are responsible to those who are dependent upon us. And you can't let the one cancel out the other. I mean, so, I mean, let me be concrete. Homicide, violence, assault, rape. You just look at the numbers. And look at the racial disparity in the numbers. I don't want to hear from a social worker about how it wasn't his fault. He had a choice to make. I mean, who are we if we as a society take such despicable behavior? And of course, I get emotional. Now I'm getting emotional about criminal behavior where they're victimizing people. Well, we should get emotional about it because it's despicable.
Yeah.
Little baby sitting on his grandmother's knee on the front porch and some THUG riding by shooting a pistol at his rival out the window and he kills him. That's despicable. Black Lives Matter. Exactly. That's despicable.
Yeah.
Like that. I think you should be able to do both things. We should have a decent society without apologizing for criminals.
Yeah.
And when they're black criminals, without apologizing for black criminals.
Yeah. And that was the thing. And then on your show I was watching, you said something to the effect, and I thought it was like also true and good to be like, and people forget too that like people in the inner city, they're Americans. Like they're your fellow country people. Like we should be also helping where we can help and not like using the crime to just be like, that's a totally lost cause and then blah, blah, blah. Because there is like when I was doing the social work, I worked with high schoolers and I would hear their stories, and it's just like if you like, I grew up in the suburbs, and it's like from a suburban perspective to be like, yeah, they just got to figure it out, man. They got to go to school. And it's like, I would hear the firsthand accounts of like what a 14-year-old girl was dealing with. And it's just like, Jesus Christ, man. It would just be like frying my computer. I'm like, this is, I wish people would take a more kind of nuanced approach and just kind of like you're saying, be able to be like, yeah, you can call out bad behavior and also not try to like use bad behavior to, if you want to take like not to like single out Fox News, but like growing up in the 90s, I'm sure you remember the news was just like on Fox News, it'd just be like, black guys are terrible. And like it almost like when I remember being a little kid watching TV, just like seeing the news and be like, Jesus Christ, that's all it was. Then it flipped to like terrorists. Then it was like, white people are the devil. So yeah, I wish people would take more of like a nuanced approach. And it really makes me think like, have you ever thought about just for the sake of the money, just cashing in and going like full Daily Wire?
And going where?
Full Daily Wire, and just being like, yeah, dude, you motherfuckers better knock it off right now. Here's my $2 million, please. Because that's crazy. You watch those right-wing commentators, and it's like, it's the same one that's like the super liberal. You know exactly how they're going to fall on the issue every time. And it's like, do you ever think about taking that money and just going totally unilateral one issue and be like, yeah, guys, just let me know. Because those guys
you're giving me
lots of money.
You're giving me ideas, man.
Just a couple of years, just cash in for a couple of years and just like, you know what, guys, I take it back. Because isn't that crazy though that you have the internet? That's like nobody's.
I'll tell you what. So,
because you could do it. You could do it very well if you wanted to.
I have the podcast, The Glenn Show, and people watch it, and it's got a Substack thing, and it had a Patreon thing, and they're paying subscribers, and there's advertisers, and there's a little bit of money on the table. There could be a lot more money.
You know what I'm talking about, exactly. That you kind of. My whole point is you kind of pay the price for being honest.
Oh wait a minute, because I got most of these guys beat because I'm a Ivy League tenured professor with an MIT PhD. Wait a minute. You're not going to be able to write that brother off, okay?
No.
And he's out there talking about what the immigrant thugs are doing.
Cats. Have you talked about eating cats yet?
They will pay. They will pay to hear that,
bro. They will pay you a couple $1 million a year. You can sign up tomorrow.
Yeah, the thought has crossed my mind, but
Yeah.